Do you want to know how to destroy your entire Formula 1 career? Well, you gotta do a bit of this.
Oh, he's just touched the ground.
Now, all of those clips that you guys just saw came from just one guy, Sergio Perez, or Checo, or the Mexican Minister of Defense, Mexican Tom Cruise, Sergio Perez, future Vietnamese F9 driver. I think this is by far the most accurate nickname. But this video is gonna be a full-blown Harvard study on this man's downfall. Because just like he destroys his cars, Sergio Perez has destroyed his Formula 1 career. From being a well-respected driver, memed on because he was funny a couple of times, to being hated on so hard on social media that Red Bull had to delete the angry responses to his contract extension post. More on that later. Sergio Perez has lost everything in his F1 career. The respect, dignity, public opinion, a fan base that's mentally stable, and an F1 seat, which he still might have as of the time of making this video, but is in jeopardy of losing too. Perez is so close to losing his seat that this would be my reaction if he gets fired. As you can see, I would be sad, but at the same time not surprised at all. But to understand just how Sergio Perez ruined his reputation in Formula 1, we have to realize one thing first. Checo has not always been like this. The man was an amazing driver, and I mean an underrated masterpiece. For those of you who weren't able to witness Checo's amazing driving back in the day, let me give you a bit of a flashback.
¿Quieres?
I'm even going to use one of YouTube's most classic songs for this, because what we need to do here is go back.
It's hot on his tail, and Perez keeps ahead by a metre through turn 11. And Verstappen goes wide. Here we go. Has Hamilton got up into fourth place? No, he's not. Sergio Perez on the inside.
All Perez could do, or was it? Perez with DRS is coming back into turn 9.
He's at the end of lap 1. Comes home to win the Sakir Grand Prix.
Sergio's tire management skills, beautiful defense for Max Verstappen in 2021, and brilliant drives during his Force India and Racing Point days solidified him as one of the best F1 drivers that any team would kill to have. He was fast, could win races, and did so many comeback drives that people still watch to this day. So how the hell did we go from that to this?
A nose to the inside, he's coming from a long way back. He's nowhere near. Oh, it's really poor. It's really poor from Perez.
Well, some of you who are chronic F1 addicts such as I am might assume that Checo's struggle started in 2023. But little did you know that it actually started a year before that. F1 enters the year 2022. New regulations were introduced to promote closer racing, drivers were excited to compete, and the season was such a roller coaster.
Stay out, stay out, stay out.
Verstappen has got ahead of Charles Leclerc, so both Red Bulls overtaking the two Ferraris.
But what really stood out during the season was Sergio Perez being critiqued by a lot of people. At the end of the 2022 season, Checo faced some form of criticism. He might have finished third in the championship, but once you take into account how he was 149 points behind Max Verstappen, driving the same car, he isn't going to be immune to that. This is a post showing how Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez compared in 2022. As you can see, it's not even close, and people were quick to notice it. Max has more race wins than Checo has podiums this year. Perez has only 2 podiums than both Hamilton and Sainz. I think that was the bare minimum expected, not gonna lie, considering he was driving arguably the best car this season. Not really arguably. Aside from the first few races, the Red Bull was the best car on basically every track, and later in the season, Ferrari got hit by the TD and fell further back. I have no ill will towards Checo, but he's incredibly lucky to have that seat. 2022 was a year where some people started to critique Sergio Perez for having his Red Bull seat, oftentimes saying that he doesn't deserve it, finishing that far behind Verstappen. I thought that criticism wasn't fair towards Checo. You know, he's Red Bull's second driver, so he can't actively try to beat Max like how Daniel Ricciardo tried to. That didn't go very well. And even if he does try to, he would literally be up against the toughest racing machine molded in Jos Verstappen's basement. It's a losing battle. But of course, being in the fastest car has some standards that you need to fulfill, and a 149 39-point gap just isn't gonna cut it. Sergio Perez knows that he needs to perform better than that. This is where pressure starts to build for him. Fans expect more from Perez, and no doubt Red Bull does as well. Because if the gap between Perez and Verstappen keeps getting bigger and bigger, then Red Bull would have to rely completely on Max Verstappen to win the Constructors' Championship. Perez would be completely useless, and useless drivers lose their seats. And this pressure is what Sergio Perez would carry with him to the 2023 season of Formula 1. Before the season started, every team was dying to get on track, and when they did, it was clear that Red Bull once again had the fastest car. This puts Perez in the same conditions as last year, but this time he really needs to drive to survive. Get it? Because that was a Netflix reference. But despite the huge pressures for Checo to perform, as the 2023 season started, he was actually doing great. In Bahrain, he finishes P2 just 11 seconds behind Verstappen, wins in Saudi Arabia, screws up in Australia qualifying but pulls off an amazing comeback drive, and wins in Baku. In the first 4 races, Sergio Perez was like his old brilliant self. I thought I was seeing a ghost for a second. His critiques expected more from him, and he delivered. But the problem is, after this, Red Bull and F1 fans weren't the only ones that expected more from Checo. Checo started to expect more from himself too. Because during these 4 races, Perez stated multiple times to the media that he has a shot at the World Championship. Sergio Perez certain he can battle Red Bull teammate Max Verstappen for World Championship. Sergio Perez convinced he can challenge Max Verstappen for F1 title. We should be leading the championship, Perez says. He'd be ahead of Verstappen without Melbourne issues. Guys, I know I might be a professional F1 yapper, but I think I just got out-yapped by Sergio Perez. My goodness, there's like a gazillion articles saying that he can beat Max. Sergio Perez stating to the media about how he can challenge for the championship might seem like a sign of confidence from Checo, but this actually added so much more pressure to himself and made fans pressure him even more. And with that kind of weight, from Red Bull wanting Perez to close the championship gap, and now F1 fans wanting a title fight, and Perez himself having to prove that he can actually beat his teammate, the pressure was building non-stop.
Oh, a dollar!
And unfortunately, it led to one of the worst mental beatdowns in F1 history. The 5th race of the 2023 season, Miami. This was a huge turning point for Sergio Perez. Before this race, he had already stated that he has a chance at beating Max in the championship, and when the race weekend started, it really did seem that way. In Q3 of qualifying, Verstappen looked like he was gonna get pole again, but he goes wide, abandons his lap, and his chances of pole position gets reduced to atoms. So Perez quickly takes that opportunity, gets pole position, Charles Leclerc then causes a red flag, and Max Verstappen, not being able to set a time, finishes all the way down in P9. So coming into the race, all the cards have been stacked against Verstappen, and Perez was loving it. All he needs to do now is to win in Miami, which should be an absolute breeze. He has pole position, his teammate is right behind Esteban Ocon, you know how that's gonna end up, and of course he is in the fastest car. But despite how easy that sounds, Miami 2023 ended up being torture for Sergio Perez. Because even if he has the fastest car, let's not forget that his teammate also does. And as I've said before, it just so happens to be the racing machine molded in Jos Verstappen's basement.
Back, now we've got DRS enabled. Say goodbye to the Red Bull.
Of Sainz.
And here's the move. Sainz can't defend. DRS, there's the move to the inside. There is second position. There's no point for Gasly to fight Verstappen. He will know it. Can't defend, even if he wanted to. He will pull out of the slipstream. Max Verstappen on the attack. Defense offered for Perez, but there'll be better traction for Max Verstappen. It's on the throttle. He'll get DRS again. We'll fight it to turn 1. The ball's wheel to wheel. And round the outside. Will it be the lead? It's close between the two of them. Max Verstappen takes the lead at the Miami Grand Prix.
Climb.
Sergio Perez was completely outclassed by Max in Miami. He had every opportunity to win but just got absolutely destroyed. This race would be the race that completely broke Sergio Perez, not physically but mentally. He had so many expectations coming into the weekend, had so much pressure from fans, the media, and himself, and was given the best luck by God, only to be crushed by lap 48. If I could read Checo's mind right then, his loss in Miami probably felt more painful than having his balls crushed by a hydraulic hydraulic press. And this race would mark the day Sergio Perez would never be the same again. And the rest of 2023 perfectly shows it.
He's missighted slightly by the car coming out the pit lane, but otherwise just way too much speed.
Oh, Perez with a moment to send him into the gravel once again in qualifying. First run in qualifying since 2019. To leave his team principal, Christian Horner, shaking his head. Perez's time has been deleted. Unbelievable for Sergio Perez.
That's 5 Q3s in a row that he's not going to make.
It's lead of the inside line. Checo Perez trying to go around the outside. He's made contact. He's made contact with Charles Leclerc.
Can you just mention what happened in turn 1?
A lot of booing. Guys, I mean, honestly, I had nowhere to go, so I was a bit in between the two Red Bulls.
Sergio Perez was completely mind-fucked in 2023 and would complete the season with zero confidence. Instead of closing that 149-point gap from last year, he extended it to 290. Holy shit! This man spent too much time yapping about beating Max Verstappen rather than actually doing it, and when he realized that the pressure was getting to him, instead of taking a step back, he pushed further without realizing his limits. And since Checo's failures increased, so did the memes. And the F1 community being the F1 community, the clowning began.
I mean, I should have done a better job.
A weekend to forget.
Certainly, yeah. I just struggled a lot. Yeah, it's really hard to digest. I hope I can recover everything.
2023 would end in a horrible bang for Sergio Perez. Almost everyone wanted him to lose his seat. Red Bull was incredibly disappointed and the media completely turned against him. Even his fans are getting tired of hearing his excuses. But 2024 would be an opportunity for Checo to redeem himself. And similar to 2023, within the first couple of races, it really looked like he was going to. In Bahrain, he finishes in P2, gets the same result in Saudi Arabia. Australia, he gets a solid P5 while Max Verstappen DNFs. Japan, he finishes second, China third, and ends Miami with a solid fourth. But in typical Sergio Perez fashion, after a few good races, he then completely forgets how to drive. In Imola, he fails to get out of Q2, finishes P8, then onto Monaco, he qualifies P16, putting him near Kevin Magnussen, so he nearly fucking dies. But despite Checo's horrible performances, the news dropped. Sergio Perez gets a contract extension with Red Bull, a multi-year deal which should secure him for both 2025 and 2026. This was a deal that Perez was super happy about, but for F1 fans, they did not like it one bit. When Red Bull announced the extension on Instagram, everyone was fuming. Among the 15,000 heart reactions on the post, there were also 3,000 angry emojis and 2,000 skull reactions, not to mention another 5,000 in the other message and 2,000 laughing emojis. It was so bad that Red Bull had to delete the reactions not even a couple minutes later. And to make matters worse, after the announcement, Perez didn't even perform better to prove that he's worthy of being in Formula 1. He performed worse. Sergio Perez looked at his contract and went, "Yup, I can be as bad as I want to now." In Canada, he doesn't make it out of Q1, is out-qualified by Logan Sargent, had a decent race until he did a Nikita Mazepin and spun his hopes and dreams away from ever being liked by F1 fans again, and breaks his rear wing along with it. And in Spain, he gets out-qualified by an Alpine. Ever since his contract extension, Perez has gotten worse, and as a result, he has lost all of the respect he had left from 2023, which, not gonna lie, wasn't really anything to begin with. But Checo has lost all the glory he had built in just 1.5 years. His fan base is literally begging him not to torture them anymore. The F1 community wants him out of the sport, and I don't think he even has any confidence left. It seems that Red Bull is the only thing that has hope for the guy. At least until the next two races that I'm gonna talk about. The final blow to Perez's career. After Spain, Austria came next, and this race was one of the most embarrassing ones for Checo. In the race weekend, he qualifies in P8, 1.3 seconds off of Max Verstappen, and when came the race, while Max was fighting against Lando Norris for the lead, Perez was busy fighting Haas. Haas, ladies and gentlemen, what is bro doing down there? And just so you know, it gets even worse than this. During Lando and Max's battle to the death, after a while they collide and both get punctures. Max had to crawl all the way to the pits as slow as fucking Stephen Hawking, changes tires, and gets a 10-second penalty while he was at it. And where was Perez after all this? Still 17 seconds behind Max Verstappen. You cannot make this up. And let's not forget the British Grand Prix. In qualifying, Perez gets stuck like he's playing stepsister on Brazzers. Christian Horner's reaction pretty much speaks for itself. And as a result, Logan Sargent out-qualifies the guy again. Logan Sargent, ladies and gentlemen. The man who loves kissing walls and is so proud of America while the presidential debates look like this.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID,
Logan's F1 career is falling apart and his country isn't doing any better. This man has every reason to be in the worst mental state possible, and yet he still outqualifies Perez. I think I'm too stunned to speak. Perez has struck me with the lightning bolt of disbelief that I think I just got brain damage just trying to understand the guy. How does someone perform so good and then so bad a couple seconds later? Does Checo have an off switch? But ultimately, this is my study of Checo's downfall from 2022 to whatever it is now, and I can very much confirm that his poor performance has cost him dearly. Sergio Perez's performance over the past 2 years has made him lose a lot of things in his F1 career. His fan base, the legacy he built in Formula 1, his reputation in the F1 community, the online support he had left, and of course, his seat, which Red Bull just mentioned recently is threatening to cut off with a contract clause if Checo does not meet standards for the rest of the 2024 season. Overall, if you want to know how to destroy your Formula 1 career, the best way to do it is to just not perform. And Perez has done exactly that. And that lack of performance for Perez was caused by both external and internal pressures that he just didn't handle correctly. But honestly, Sergio Perez's fate in Formula 1 is the same fate that most of Max Verstappen's teammates have. So at least he has my respect of lasting that long in the Red Bull team. Or what I personally like to call it, a broken home. And although a redemption arc for Perez is definitely possible, as long as he's in Red Bull, being in Max Verstappen's shadow just isn't gonna cut it. So Checo, as I conclude this video, in the next couple of years, I expect you to do the same as Max Verstappen's previous teammates, which is to get the hell out of Red Bull and see you in your ultimate form. Which is probably a Chinese F4 driver.